Elisha is the prophet at that time. And God sends him to Joash, who's king, with this amazing promise. Elisha comes with the instruction to Joash to open the east window and shoot arrows out. And those arrows represent the victory God's giving him over his enemy. Amazing, right? So obviously, Joash responds. He opens the window and he shoots arrows out. But this is where the story gets challenging for you and I. Because Elisha now gets upset that he only shot 3 arrows. Elisha is upset and tells him, you should have done more. If you'd done more, your victory would be complete rather than partial. Now the challenge for you and I is, how was Joash to know? He was simply responding to the promise and the instruction that he received. But it leads into the deception of complacency. Complacency, not from the context of those who think they're all right with God, but rather the complacency of the assumption that we fulfill what God has called us to. Now, admittedly, this is a greater danger later in life when we can look back on victories and accomplishments. And admittedly also, while your purpose is unique to you, and that purpose is to continually to be pushed forward throughout your life, the application of that will change in the different seasons of life. But the reality is, you're never finished here on earth. As long as you're breathing, you're not done. But complacency can cause us to believe that we've done it, and now then we're just doing this over here. That we can literally reference the victory, the accomplishments, whatever it may be. And remember, without faith, it's impossible to please God. And that's not just salvation. That's everything that we do should have a faith requirement. That causes us to lean on God, His power and His presence to see that real impact. And that recognizing those victories and accomplishments need to be put in the right perspective. Revelation says it this way. God says to one of the churches, you're neither hot nor cold, you're lukewarm. The Message Bible says it this way, which I like. It says, you're stale, you're stagnant. But it goes on and says, and you think you're doing great, oblivious to the real situation. And specifically, how often complacency causes us to ease into that place of comfort. And comfort is the enemy. That when we are comfortable, now that doesn't mean we don't rest in God's power. But when we are not being stretched, we're not being stretched in our faith, then we are easing into that complacency, that we are stale. We're becoming stagnant. And again, it's about recognizing those past victories, those past accomplishments have a place, but not as something we lean on, but rather, like with David, they should be the trophies that spur us to greater faith, greater accomplishments. When David was preparing to face Goliath, what did he say to Saul? He said, I've battled the lion, I battled the bear, and God delivered them into my hand. And God will deliver this filthy Philistine into my hand. That they were trophies inspiring him to greater confidence in what God would do, greater faith, preparing him for that greater challenge. But how often do people hit that phase where they can look at some amazing accomplishment and just come to that conclusion that it's okay now, we can relax? See, that's the deception of complacency. That we can, many times, specifically look at something God has done in the past, but rather than looking for that new challenge, regardless of the phase of life we're in, whatever the season, whatever the role, that God is calling us to greater victories, greater challenges that are only able to be fulfilled and the victories accomplished through Him. That going back to Joash, that he probably had a sense of fulfillment, that I did what God asked me to do. I opened the window, I shot the arrows. Rather than, hey, I'm out of arrows. I've shot everything I've got. Somebody bring me more arrows. We want a greater victory. Now, obviously he didn't know, but it does, again, it spur us. What's the thing? What's the story we tell ourselves? Do we tell ourselves we're doing great? Or are we challenging ourselves that God has greater things ahead? They require greater faith, greater confidence in what He's going to do, that they're going to challenge us to a greater degree, but also leave a greater legacy for those who come after us, to challenge them to greater victories.